Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we don't only have cyclical problems, but we also have structural problems. And I think that's important. I mean, the Council of Economic Advisors told us that we are in decline from 2% growth potential at the beginning of the century down to 0.5% currently and for the foreseeable future if we don't make fundamental changes. So acknowledging the problem is first, but we have enacted quite a lot of reforms, and we can get into what those are in a second. So we do acknowledge the problem, but we are also doing something about the problem.
Tell me about the reforms, because there are a lot of people looking at Germany saying from the outside and from the inside, whether it's the IFW or it's commentary in the FT or whatever, saying you're just not spending enough money. Public investment is historically low.
Well, that is not true, because the budget that is now going to Parliament has the record highest investment number in German history. So in that sense, we are investing quite a lot. Whether that's sufficient for the needs is, of course, an open question. But, of course, we have to work within the constraints of our budget that we have. Even more important is the fact that we are also doing structural reforms. So giving tax incentives for investment and research, giving incentives to people who are unemployed to seek work, giving incentives for people approaching retirement to extend their work life, increasing the supply of energy both through a massive build out of renewables and an initiative to add 17 gigawatts of gas-fired power plants to our grid, building out the grid both for electricity, gas and hydrogen.
Gosh, where do I start? There's so many points there. Okay, I'll come back at you with one of those points there as well. There are members of the renewable energy community, huge CEOs, who say to me the problem with Germany is they give regulations and permits, and I can't put up my solar fields. I can't put up my turbines where the regulations are awful. But yet if Germany wants to put in an LNG terminal, they can do it in 6 days. The renewable industry is struggling to build quickly enough in Germany.
Well, the fact is the record of new installed capacity for solar so far was 2015 with 7.5 gigawatts. Last year we installed 14. So we almost doubled the record that we had for solar. So in that sense, that somewhat contradicts what you're saying.
And the turbines?
We're on track now for 16 this year, and our plan is to get to 22. The turbines, the status quo is too slow, completely agree. However, I just received the numbers. The approval time has shrunk by 30%, and there is a pipeline of onshore wind that will exceed the goals that we have to go from 57 gigawatts in 2021 to 115 gigawatts. So we're behind schedule on that, completely acknowledged, but we've given a lot of incentives on the permitting to accelerate that process so that the turbine manufacturers and operators can be more happy with what is happening in Germany. And last point, we just auctioned another 8 gigawatts of offshore. We started the legislative period with a total installed base of 7. We auctioned 8 gigawatts last year, another 8 gigawatts this year, so we've tripled our capacity for offshore. Of course, that takes until 2029, 2030 to build, but that is just the fastest it can go.
So there are more moves that can be done, but you are moving fairly quickly. Okay. When Europe looks at IRA, it looks at the CHIPS Act, it sees incredible speed of action as well. When Robert Habeck looks at it, he says, yeah, we can do some of that. But then Christian Lindner says, no, we're going to do tax cuts sponsored by public expenditure cuts as well. Who's right, Lindner or Habeck?
Well,
two men you work with.
The compromise that the budget shows with a record amount of public investment shows you that we can reconcile the fiscal solidity on the one side with the willingness to engage in public expenditure on the other side. So what I talked about in renewables, we are giving record amount of money to our railway system, which has been correctly criticized for being far too slow, far too unreliable. So record money is also going into digitizing and investing into our rail infrastructure. As another example of public expenditure, At the same time, our highways, our bridges are being reconstructed. Also, we accelerated planning and permissioning for those. So we're trying also on many infrastructure questions to finally catch up on the delays that we had.
So it's interesting you're talking about what the federal government can do, what the state governments can do potentially as well. These structural problems, they go down to a corporate level as well. In fact, one of the quotes I saw as well was that the old core industries have resisted change for far too long. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, if you're seeing that, for example, in the automotive industry, what VW announced is an acknowledgement that they've been too slow into reforming. But now they are catching up. They're making very large investments into electric vehicles. So of course there's tension and there's difficulty in this.
So they're making electric vehicles, which are fantastic vehicles, but they aren't more technologically updated compared with the Chinese, and they're more expensive compared with the Chinese as well.
The consumer will decide on that, right? I mean, at the moment we are exporting far more cars to China than we are importing from China, and the German corporates are saying, even very vocally, we do not need tariff protection from Chinese electric vehicles. We can cope with the competition ourselves, and we can use the excess cash flows from the combustion engine sales that are still coming in to invest into electric vehicles, and they are confident that they will prevail in this competition. I mean, that's something for the private sector, right?
Sure.
I mean, we give incentives. We've just passed on Wednesday an incentive rule for corporate fleet owners to get tax breaks and quicker depreciation if they buy electric. So we're giving the right incentives. But at the end, of course, it's consumer choice that will decide.
So it shouldn't be tariffs from the EU. It should be incentives
Yes.
from the auto manufacturers to make it cheaper for the customer rather than making it more expensive for the Chinese vehicles.
That is my firm conviction.
One quick question on the politics. You're obviously not a party politician, but what is going on in terms of the political situation where there can be far left parties and far right parties getting either close to power or in power in areas such as Thuringia and Saxony?
Well, first of all, as this conference shows, we are far from the only country where this trend to more fragmentation is taking place. I was in Evian yesterday with Chancellor Olaf Scholz, where he met with President Macron, and French CEOs also reported from the fragmentation in the French political system. I think this is something that is not specific to Germany, but the government, of course, is also at the same time simultaneous to this trend, dealing with all of this structural reform that has to be done from the lagging behind, which we haven't done for far too long. So that creates, of course, a lot of tension and conflicts, no doubt. And you have to acknowledge that. We're not in denial about this.
Do you think until the next elections next year, we're going to see a stable government?
Well, the fact that we have so many things and so many reforms to do and still in the pipeline, all of these economic reforms that I told you about are just passing Parliament as we speak, literally, and in the next coming months. So of course there will be lively debate around those. There will be lively debate around our budget. There will be lively debate around our pension reforms, which we're also doing in all three pillars of our system. So I cannot promise you love, peace, and harmony, but I can tell you that so far, despite all of these intensive discussions, conflicts, at the end of the day, we've managed to pass into law all of the reforms that we have been planning to do, plus what has come on top due to Russia's aggression on Ukraine and all of the needs for action that has entailed.